Hamas is now agreeing to a ceasefire deal. Now, if you've been following this story, you'll remember that last month Hamas refused a ceasefire hostage release deal that was put on the table. It was negotiated by President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, in conjunction with the Qataris and the Egyptians, and Hamas at the last minute pulled out and refused the ceasefire deal. And now they're announcing that they are agreeing to what is essentially the same deal. So what changed? Why are they agreeing to this now? And why do I believe that the Israelis must reject this deal? And that is what the Israelis are saying now. We're going to break this all down in this video. So let's first start with what's in the deal. Hamas would release 10 live hostages and 18 deceased hostages during the course of the 60-day ceasefire. Israel would be required to release 200 what are considered heavy terrorists, and that means terrorists who have blood on their hands or have been directly involved in deadly attacks. 600 truckloads of humanitarian aid would be allowed into the Gaza Strip through UN-affiliated agencies specifically. The IDF would be required to withdraw from most of the Gaza Strip except for a 1-kilometer perimeter around the edge. And during those 60 days, there would be negotiations for the rest of the hostages and an end to the war. So why is Hamas agreeing to this now? Well, the most important change that's happened since Hamas rejected the deal last month till today is that the Israeli government made the decision that they're no longer going to be accepting any more partial deals. Instead, they made the decision to conquer the remaining 25% of the Gaza Strip that is not yet under IDF control, including most notably Gaza City and the surrounding areas where Hamas is still very much in control, and it is believed that that's where the hostages are being held. So the Israelis decided that they're once and for all going to finish this thing and conquer all the rest of the Gaza Strip. This past Monday, President Trump wrote on social media, on Truth Social, quote, "We will only see the return of the remaining hostages when Hamas is confronted and destroyed. The sooner this takes place, the better the chances of success will be." And I've said this before, I said it in my previous video, we've all known all along, everyone who watches this closely has known since the very beginning of the war, that the chances that Hamas would ever release all of the hostages, every last one of them, were slim to none, for a very simple reason. Hamas's main insurance policy keeping them alive is the fact that they're holding Israeli hostages. That's the only reason that Israel hasn't finished them off quickly the way Israel defeated Hezbollah rather quickly and easily. The Israelis do not want to harm the chances of rescuing the hostages, and therefore they've been very careful and very deliberate about how they go about it. But we always knew that the point would come in this war when Hamas would simply refuse to release the final hostages and Hamas would need to be destroyed. And Israel has always insisted since the beginning of the war that the only way this war ends is with Hamas disarmed, no longer in power, no longer a governing or military entity. And Hamas's entire strategy right now is to buy time, to get their hands on as much supplies as possible, and that would increase their chances of survival. And that's why in this deal, they insist on 600 trucks of humanitarian aid every single day, only going through UN-affiliated agencies. Just a few weeks ago, the UN itself admitted that upwards of 90% of all of the aid that goes into the Gaza Strip through the UN-affiliated agencies ends up getting looted and taken by Hamas and Hamas affiliates. So Hamas is demanding that all of the aid go into the Gaza Strip only through UN agencies. Now, what that says about UN agencies, that 90% of what goes into them goes to Hamas, and that Hamas wants all the aid to go through the UN, it just shows you how complicit the United Nations is with Hamas. But that's a separate story. So Hamas is agreeing to the ceasefire now because they're terrified about this decision of the Israelis to take over the rest of the Gaza Strip and completely defeat them. So now they're saying, wait, okay, we agree to the deal that we rejected last month, because they know that it'll buy them time. It'll give them 60 days. It'll give them lots and lots of supplies. And during that 60-day ceasefire, even if at the end of it, Israel goes back to fighting them, that will give them a tremendous amount of supplies. Now, 600 trucks a day, understand that 600 trucks is more than the amount of aid that is needed to feed the entire Gaza Strip for a week. By demanding 600 trucks every single day, their intention is to stockpile aid for months ahead, knowing that the war will continue at some point. This gets into the reason why Israel cannot accept this deal, which we'll get into in a few moments. So what is Israel saying about this deal? So Prime Minister Netanyahu insists that there will be no more partial deals. The only deal on the table now is a deal for all of the hostages and for Hamas to completely surrender. And the plans to conquer all of Gaza City are moving forward. Draft notices have been sent out to tens of thousands of reservists. The Israeli army and the Israeli government are getting ready for full control of Gaza City and to finish off Hamas once and for all. Now, Israel must reject this deal. Patience is running out. When I say patience is running out, both in Washington, D.C., where, as you see from President Trump's recent pronouncements, the Americans who have been at Israel's side for a long time really need Israel to finish this war quickly. But the Israeli people feel that way as well. Israeli soldiers in the field, and especially the reservists who've had to leave their jobs and their families for long periods of time during this war, also need this war to end. It cannot keep going on like this. And what's more, this deal, as I just pointed out, will not only delay the fighting for another 60 days, but because it will resupply Hamas to the tune of 600 truckloads every day, it will mean that Hamas will emerge from the 60-day ceasefire much better armed, with more personnel, with more supplies, and more ready for a long-term fight. I'll also add that CNN reported the other day that a regional source involved in the Gaza talks told CNN that Hamas is insisting on written American guarantees for a ceasefire after 60 days. Hamas wants the U.S. to ensure that Israel does not return to war. So Hamas sees this as a way to ultimately stop the war completely and allow themselves to survive and to remain in power. Now, it's worth remembering that Hamas isn't even holding all of the hostages. And this is something that's not really being widely reported. But in all of the conversations about these hostage release deals, we have to keep this in mind. Hamas is only holding an estimated half of the remaining hostages. Some of the hostages are being held by a different terrorist group called Palestinian Islamic Jihad, who tends to cooperate with Hamas. So one could argue that maybe they would also cooperate if Hamas needed to return the hostages that they were holding. But there's an estimated 6 to 8 hostages who are being held by extremist Salafi groups or local clans. We saw this earlier in the war. A number of hostages were rescued from a civilian home. They weren't even being held by Hamas operatives. Bottom line is, Hamas has no incentive to ever release all of the hostages. That's never going to happen as long as Israel demands that Hamas be destroyed as an end goal of this war. And there's no way that Israel can agree to any kind of deal that allows Hamas to rearm, resupply, recruit more members, and ultimately leads to negotiations leaving Hamas in power. So we're really at the same impasse we've been at until now. But there's also a very strong pull on Prime Minister Netanyahu. There's a lot of pressure on him internally by sectors of the Israeli public to do whatever deal we could do to get back whatever hostages we could get back. But let me make it very clear. This would be a disaster. Israel must reject this deal and must just drive towards victory. I know that it means that the lives of the hostages are further endangered by Israel pressing forward with an offensive. But let's be clear-eyed here. We've all seen the videos of these hostages. We've all seen the condition that they're in. Many of them have been killed in captivity, and they are in daily danger of death anyway. In past history, whenever there have been hostages held by terrorists, the Israeli policy and the Western policy in general is not to negotiate with them, but to carry out operations to try to free them, even knowing that that puts their their lives at risk. There is simply no justification morally for allowing hostage taking to be an effective tactic. And the Israeli public is losing its patience with this war. Everyone in Israel, slowly but surely, is coming to the realization that in order to secure the future of Israel, we must completely defeat Hamas. And delaying the end of the war and allowing Hamas to rearm and regroup only means more Israeli soldiers being killed on the battlefield. It means a greater chance that this will turn into a forever war and that our children and grandchildren will continue fighting it in the future. This is not an acceptable outcome. So bottom line, Israel must reject this deal. The cost of agreeing to a 60-day ceasefire, releasing all of these prisoners, allowing in hundreds and hundreds of trucks of aid every single day directly into the hands of Hamas, while also withdrawing the IDF forces to a perimeter around Gaza, allowing Hamas to reconsolidate its power within the Gaza Strip. These all would prolong the war and cause more death and destruction and security problems for Israel far into the future. This deal is a disaster. And right now, what the Israeli government should continue pressing forward with what they are already doing, which is planning the total destruction and defeat of Hamas.